Jay here for Stretford, Paddock, and this is Fanzine Friday. And joining me today is the editor and founder of United's biggest selling fanzine, and the man that gave me my first ever job outside Old Trafford, selling the mag about 26 years ago, Andy Mitten from United We Stand. Andy, how are you doing?
Nice to talk to you, Justin. You're officially the 42nd best ever United We Stand seller, and when you consider we've had nearly 50 sellers, you're not badly placed there, mate.
I'll say that, mate. I'm happy with that. We'll get to how you started the fanzine a little bit later on, but I want to talk about the latest issue. Tell us a little bit about the latest issue and what sort of things are going on in it.
It's a summer special. It's number 306, so we passed our 30th anniversary in November, and it's out the 10th of August, so it's being printed at the moment. And these are odd times because we don't have games to sell at like you used to sell outside the ground. You're familiar with how we distribute United We Stand. So we've had to change doing what we do. And we're mailing out a lot of copies. We've seen a surge in subscriptions for printed editions and also for digital editions as well. We sell them in the newsstand, but that's been really problematic. The sales are down about 70% because, I walked through Manchester and London last week, and loads of the newsagents are just not open. So we've seen a real shift, obviously away from the ground and away from the newsstand towards subscriptions, and loads of people have been ordering single issues as well. So we've been busy just going through the lists and sending them all out. It's quite nice. I've gone through everything myself, and it's nice to see where your readers live, and there's a huge spread right across the UK, right across the world, and we're getting emails from people in India. I've just done one now in Los Angeles. How do I buy the issue? And you say, well, look, the quickest way is to do the digital subscription, but if you want a printed one, we're more than happy to send you one. But it's a 60-pager. I've got an interview in there, the second part of our exclusive with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. The first part was when he said, I'd rather have a hole in my team than an arsehole, or asshole, if I was reading it out. Some people wrote it. And there's loads in there. We try and do stuff that you can't find online. That's what I try and do. I try and put information in there that nobody knows by basically putting the hours in as a journalist and someone who's done it for a long time to tell United fans stuff that they don't know. And what we do reflects a lot of the match-going culture. Most of our readers are match-going fans, but there's loads of people who used to go to games, maybe they've emigrated, and loads of people who are just fascinated by the match-going culture. So there's articles in there on a trip to Leeds in 2001 where it kicked right off. I wasn't part of it. It wasn't like my first trip to Leeds when I walked out behind the Lowfields Road stand, 17 years old. Manchester, bang! I didn't even get the word Manchester out of my mouth. And I was on the floor. Some Leeds fan just decked me. And I was dazed, like 20 minutes into the game. I didn't even know which way United were trying to score at. So a trip to Leeds wasn't for the faint-hearted.
No, I know. I've only ever been Selling Road once actually, and that was more than enough for me, to be honest with you. There's a link in the description as well. If you heard what Andy said and you want to check out the digital edition, do have a look at that as well. Andy, what's it like for you when you hear that and you see people? You spoke about fans in India, fans all over the world, reading the mag and getting their sort of United fan culture from your fanzine that you started so many years ago.
I think we're all really proud of the fanzine. I say without that big team of writers, and we've got a huge team, without all that energy, it wouldn't exist. You need the energy to exist. I see projects come along, new fanzines maybe, and they burn brightly for 6 months, for a year, for 2 years, and then they just fade away. And to have longevity, you need energy going in year after year, and it's not easy. Getting people to stand outside Old Trafford, as you know, on a February night when it's raining is pretty unglamorous. But we print the mags. We've got to pay the printers. We can't turn around to the printers and say we can't pay this month because it was raining against Partizan Belgrade or whatever. We didn't sell many copies. But yeah, we worked really hard on it, and we've had big interviews this year with people like Ed Woodward and with Ollie. And I felt that we needed to put difficult questions to Ed Woodward, and our readers appreciated that, and we did do, and we pushed him in certain areas. And I had an hour and a half with him, and I'd ask him exactly the same questions if I spoke to him tomorrow. And if I had 6 hours, I'd be able to do follow-up after follow-up. That's my job as a journalist. I work for lots of different people. But to get an hour and a half with him and to put across our concerns is something that United We Stand should be doing. And I think people appreciate it. We won Fanzine of the Year in December. We look for talented writers, talented designers. Rick, who does the covers, Bandit Nana, is really talented. I suppose it's my job just to bring it together, to oversee everything, to spot new talents, new writing talents, and also to say to other people, you know, your article's not made the cut this month. We're in a really nice position where we get sent lots of quality stuff in, but it's got to be different. If people are buying a fanzine with money, it's got to stand out. It's got to be worth buying with money. And if someone's just going to send in a piece saying, you know, Bruno Fernandes is good and he scored 8 goals and he's really good, and you're not telling anyone anything new there. So we try and offer insight, which is the hardest thing to do in journalism. But yeah, we're very proud of it when, and I think our readers like it. It's really nice selling United We Stand. It's nice going to games, and that hasn't always been the case. And there's often a real disconnect between the difference between online and in reality. So if we wind back exactly a year, I can remember standing outside the ground in Oslo, and Norwegian Reds were coming up to me and they were buzzing off the fanzine. And yet at the same moment, I was getting slaughtered online by basically anonymous people because, you know, I hadn't given transfer news which people agreed with. So this is happening at exactly the same moment. You're getting slaughtered, and yet in the real world, people are coming up and you know, buzzing off the fanzine, and it's just part of the territory of what I do. I love doing it. I could have chosen not to do it and to take other offers, to write for other people, to take full-time jobs with other people. But United We Stand's always been really close to my heart. And you know some of the people who have been involved for years, and we've had offers to buy it out. We've just said no. We value the independence of it, and we do it to the best of our ability.
No, 100%. I know what you mean. And when, like, I remember when you did the Woodward interview, I remember being stood on the Stretford end, honestly, at half time. So many people had the mag out and were talking about it, and you've seen this, and, you know, just all stood around, just mates sort of at the game at half time chatting about it. What's that like for you as well when you see things like, because obviously, you know, you're a United fan, you started this off your own back, and to see, you know, United fans there reading your interview and chatting about it and discussing it, that must be, you know, a real buzz.
It was, and in the way that, one, we got the interview, 2, we got a proper interview with him. We weren't just being fobbed off. I didn't need to be fobbed off. I just said to him, look, this is disgraceful what's going on. This recruitment's not good enough. And we had to do that for our own credibility. We had to put tough questions to him. And I think our readers appreciated that. And that's what we should be doing. I mean, I worked out, it took me 32 hours to do that interview. It took a long time to go through it all. And I went to London to see him. And why does Ed Woodward want to do the interview? Well, he was getting slaughtered. He was getting absolutely slaughtered. And some of the stuff that people were saying about him wasn't true. So I could say to him, is this true? Is this true? No, not at all. But in other areas, he had to hold his hands up and say, our recruitment has not been good enough. Well, how do you do the recruitment? What's going on with the recruitment? I think the problem around that interview is some football fans, if I interview someone who's popular, the reaction is quite like a great interview, great lad, great writer, just because they like the person. And might not be a good interview. And with Woodward, because he's not popular, it's like crap article, crap journalist, worst journalist ever. How are you even getting paid for that? And that, I mean, what do you want me to do? Only interview people who you like. Only interview people who are going to tell you what you want to hear. Because if you start doing that, that's really dangerous for democracy, for journalism. And I think we did the right thing. I'd do exactly the same thing the next time. And I think our readers appreciate that. And we stand outside the ground. We hear what people are saying. And people come up to you and they'll say, don't like him. I wasn't convinced by all his answers, but fair play to him on that. Let's see if he's right then. And to be fair to him, in certain areas, United have improved. But let's not pretend that 2013 to the end of 2019 was a glory era for Manchester United, because it wasn't. And he had to take some of the responsibility for that because he was the main man.
How difficult has it been, Andy? Because you sort of, you know, you are a fan and you are involved in fan culture, and you know, you run the fanzine, and yet you do speak to players, you speak to Ed Woodward, you speak to the manager. How hard is it? Difficult is it to get that balance? Because you always seem to do balance it really well. Of sort of the impossible task of keeping the fans happy and getting that access. How hard is that?
You've got to do it properly, and timing can be really curious. So we interviewed Matic pre-season, and I said on my Twitter, I've just interviewed Matic. And honestly, Justin, tumbleweed, nobody cared. Because in the mind of a lot of people, he's finished, he'd gone. But what do you want me to do then? Not interview him. And when I interviewed him, I only spoke to him about Serbia. I'm not looking for those, I want to win the league this year type quotes. I'm looking for something which is a bit different. And actually, when he started talking about Serbia, he really opened up, and it was a good interview. Another example is at the end of September, I went to Ole Gunnar's hometown, Kristiansund, and it was a time when he was under heavy pressure. And I dug out contacts there. I spoke to his old coach. I spoke to some of his close friends there. And it was a pretty hairy time. It's a beautiful place, and I was really happy with the story I wrote. But when I said I was there, I'm in Kristiansund, and this is the harbour, and it's sunset. There was a lot of, Solskjaer will be back there soon. He'll be back by Christmas. Why didn't you drive him there? A whole line of negativity. And when the piece came out, the timing was wrong, because people didn't want to read about him because United weren't playing well. They were losing matches. It's my job to write the truth. The problem in football is there's often two versions of the truth. So I want to ask questions which help me find the truth. I'd say that I wouldn't have got where I was by being a blagger. I work really, really hard and travel around the world. And that might seem glamorous, but I've got a young family, and I'm often leaving them to do proper journalism. And that can be going in with Lazio's ultras, who are dangerous. They're dangerous. Their leader had just been murdered, and I went in with him on the curb, and all the Italian journalists said, they'll never let you in. And it took a lot of trust building for them to let me in. I went to Mexico last year to Sinaloa to see Maradona. It wasn't my idea, it was my editor's idea. And he just said, I'm sending a war photographer with you from the New York Times. Just get stuck in. Yeah, but he doesn't want to do any interviews. He said, no, I'm not going to do an interview. Just go there. And I did as a journalist. I got the interview. And at the end of it, Maradona's walked back to me, and he struggles to walk. And he said, yeah, you're from Manchester, aren't you? He said, your team, he said, they need a new manager, me. And I thought, these quotes are just going to go around the world. But for me to get that quote, I had to leave Old Trafford early, fly to Charles de Gaulle, fly overnight to Mexico City, fly north to Sinaloa. It's really interesting, and I was really glad to get the interview. But it's proper journalism. It's expensive. It's expensive to send me there, and it needs paying for in some form. And I try and do interesting stories. It's not possible every single week. And there's parts of it that are quite depressing. I went to Belgrade and went undercover with some Partizan Belgrade fans, hooligans. I was really proud of the piece I wrote. It took months in planning, months and months and months. And then a week later, I made a 10-minute phone call to Madrid and wrote a transfer story about David De Gea, and it got 10 times as many hits. And that depresses you a little bit, because there are only a certain number of people who want quality journalism, and that's the most expensive type to do, because it involves the type of research and travel that I've said.
No, I know what you mean, and I always admire, because it always amazes me. Like, one day I'll read a piece from you sort of in South America interviewing Anderson or someone, and the next you're in, I don't know, you're at Altrincham or something like that. It seems to be such a mixed bag of the stories you cover. I just want to go back to the start of the fanzine, which I'm guessing was around the sort of the early 90s when you first started United We Stand?
It was 89.
89, sorry.
15 at school, 1989. United were 8th in the table. We're a pretty terrible team. And I felt that fans were being forgotten about. Admission prices were going up, although it was still cheap. The British government was trying to make decisions on behalf of football fans. They called us all hooligans. I thought, I'm not a hooligan. I remember going to Forest away and paying twice what I was earning from my paper round to stand on a terrace with a terrible view with a floodlight stanchion in front of me, and just thought, this is disgraceful, really. We've been treated like second-class citizens. And I suppose from that, that's what fueled the first wave of football fanzines. And I never for 1 minute thought it would carry on for as long as it did. The first few issues of United We Stand were pretty terrible. I mean, they were done by 15-year-olds, and it looked like it. But after a few years, 2 or 3 years, it was getting better. More talent was joining, and we were starting to get interviews. I wrote a letter to Mr. Ferguson asking for an interview, and he replied.
Just tell us a little bit about that, because for starters, you know, it takes a bit of, someone might even call it naivety to write to Fergie thinking you're going to get an interview, but it worked. You got a reply, and tell us a little bit about what happened next.
Well, I said I'd be going on the pre-season tour, and that we went to every game home and away, and that you should talk to us. And he's obviously saw that and thought, okay. And he said, well, come to the dressing room in Lillestrøm away and introduce yourself. So I went to the dressing room after the game and knocked on the door, and Ken Merritt, the then secretary, opened it, and the whole team were in there just in the showers, and she just won the Cup Winners' Cup. And Fergie came out, you know, he had his towel, and he's like, well, it's not a good place to do it. You go to the next game in Trondheim. I said, yeah. He went, come to the team hotel tomorrow, 2:00 in the afternoon. So we caught the train the next day up to Trondheim, which was 6 or 7 hours. And I just went, like, took one of my mates with me, because I didn't know that you weren't allowed to take one of your mates with you. Walked in the team hotel, Fergie came down, and we were kids. And I look back now, it was just a totally wasted opportunity, because I recorded it on, remember them tape-to-tape ghetto blasters, a big red one, and I put it on the table, and he just started laughing, as if to say, like, look at this knobhead. And he shouted Steve Bruce down, look at this knobhead here. And I interviewed him, and he was relaxed, and he was there for talking. And he was in a good place, because United had won the Cup Winners' Cup, and United were ascendant again after a few difficult years. And after like an hour and a bit, I said, I'm going to have to go now, because we've got to meet our other mates. And right, okay, nice one, son. And then we went, and I'm thinking, why did we cut the interview short? And if I look back at that interview, it's terrible. It is so terrible. There's so many areas I should have followed up. But look, I'd not done any journalism training, which I'd start a year later. I didn't really know what questions to ask. You know, turned up in a United shirt with a matching stereo, and then said, I've got to go and meet my mate by the train station. And then I went and met back up with my mates, and, you know, I did interview him years later, again for United We Stand. And that time, when the tape recorder went off, he went absolutely mad at me, because I'd given his book an iffy review and he saw it, and he's like, what do you know about books? And I'm like, well, I've written 6, you know, I know what I'm doing. And then bang, 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 bang. And you're just about to reply. Anyway, son, good to see you. Do you want a picture? So I felt like you're in a boxing ring with him, and he's just pummeling you, and you're about to hit back, because I'm not scared of him. I mean, I adore him. He's an incredible manager, incredible person, but I'm not scared of him. I don't owe him anything. And anyway, son, good to see you. Do you want a picture? And I just thought, he's just done me there, big time. Basically, because I'd done a review of his book, which was very fair. I think I'm pretty fair, and maybe that's why we get some access. I'm not going to stitch people up. I'm not looking for that short-term twisting of words to kill somebody in print. We don't need to do that, and that's quite a luxury in today's market, especially with like clickbait around. I don't need to do that, and you know, I've seen Ferguson plenty of times since, and you know, he's a good man and he's a great football manager, but we had our ups and downs. I'm sure a lot of journalists would say that.
I just can't. I'll never get over it. I've heard you say about that before, but you know, I've got to go meet my mate.
No.
Sat down, United manager, right? That's enough of that. I've got to go. See you later. What? Okay.
I mean, we were just stupid kids. We once interviewed an official at United, not the chairman, but a senior official, and this was the same summer. And again, I took my mate, who was a City fan, just because he was bored and it was school holidays. And we both just sat there, and this official in his office at Old Trafford, he had like a shaving cut, and we were both like giggling because blood was coming down here. Just immature idiots asking the wrong questions. And, you know, you do grow up and you do realise that journalism should be serious. And I take what I do very seriously. And sometimes you get good interviews and you learn that when a player's retired is more likely to open up and be far more interesting or be far more open. And some of my best relationships with players have come after they've finished playing for Manchester United. They might have known me in the mix zone. And, you know, lads like Andy Cole, if he's watching this, he might he'd agree with me anyway. It could be hard work as a player, but he's a great lad. He's a really great lad. And his way as a player was just to zone out, not speak to the media, just to focus on scoring goals, which I suppose was the most important thing. And other lads like Nemanja Vidic, it takes years to get the trust of these people. And you click with some and you click less with others. That's just the story of, you know, any human relationship. But I find it great that, you know, you mentioned Anderson, and you go and interview him and you sort of know what you're going to get, and he turns and he keeps you waiting for, you know, 18 hours because he's Anderson, and then he says, do you want to come and stay at my house? We're going to go partying. And you suddenly think, right, this all sounds great, but, you know, I'm a dad of two, and, you know, suddenly you're 3 a.m. and you're partying with Anderson in Brazil. And he's a great character, and you can see why people like Sir Alex loved him and cared for him so much, because there's a good person under that. And when an interview happens like that, they'd be brilliant. And the opposite of that would be like a PR scripted one where you might get invited by a sponsor and you get there and it's okay, you've got 15 minutes. And I had some horrors with that. You know, I interviewed a young Wayne Rooney thanks to a sponsor. And I remember just saying to his people, there's no way we can put this on the front cover of 442, which is it's not good enough. It's nowhere near good enough. And they knew that. And to his credit, Wayne got a lot better as he got older, and he got a lot more interesting. And I read his column in the Sunday Times now, and it's brilliant, really good. And I genuinely believe it's him as well. I mean, a journalist is shaping it, because I've done that working with lots of different players. So it shows that, you know, a lot of players can get a lot better as they get older in terms of talking to the media.
Oh yeah, 100%. I interviewed Wayne Rooney a couple of times when I was at Q103 for radio, and this was towards obviously the end of his time at United. And he was a really good talker. But that must show as well sort of the respect you have and the respect players have for you. The fact that, you know, you've been fair with them and honest, because they're willing to speak to you and after they've retired or whatever, and even become friends with them. That must be, you know, sort of affirmation that, you know, you're doing a good job, because these people still trust you now.
Yeah, you're not set out to become friends with them. If you just get on some... Oh no, I've probably interviewed 1,000 footballers, and I could probably say that 6 or 7 of them are people who are, you know, talked to about nothing which was like football related. I do my research. I try and find interesting stuff out about these people. And my problem now is that you'll publish the interview and it's what other people do with it. So they might steal your quotes, or steal too many quotes, or twist your quotes. And then you'll get the player coming back to you and he's thinking, why have I even bothered doing this interview? Because they've twisted and what they've said has been taken out of context. And I won't take that line down. I'd do something about that. And some of them are just really, really interesting people. Nemanja Vidic is a really interesting lad. Gary Neville's really interesting. And Gary's 100 miles an hour, and we didn't speak for years when he was at United, but I really like him. He's a very, very interesting lad. And then Paul Scholes did sort of very little, and then suddenly he finishes playing and he comes across and he's really blunt and he's honest. And you find as you do more and more in journalism, and you get better contacts, you can write less and less. So you end up knowing far more than you can write. And you might be times where, you know, I've done trips with players abroad, and if I was a different type of journalist, I could have written that he was with, you know, this type of person. I don't know, it might be a single player just going out and trying to pull a girl. But I wouldn't. So I suppose you become trusted, but you should also do your job. Your loyalty should always be to the reader, to tell them interesting things to tell them the truth. But to get someone to talk, you just can't go in and barge in with, aggressive questions. You've got to do your job as an interviewer and get people to talk. And I keep mentioning Vidic because he's one who's really surprised me. And I'll go and see him probably once a year in Milan, and we'll go out for hours and hours, and we'll just talk about like politics and things that are really interesting from his part of the world. And he'll have a go at me and he'll really corner me. I'm like, whoa, no one said that. No one said this to me before. Whoa, what you're on about, you knob? And it's interesting and it's stimulating. And then I'll say, look, we've got to record this. Oh, must we do an interview? And I'm like, well, I can't just come to Milan. Much as this is nice to have a chat with you, I can't just come for pasta. I can't come to a different country for a plate of pasta. And but yeah, it's good. And then you get on with him, and then you see that United have drawn Partizan Belgrade, and then you think, who can I interview there? And you look at the team and you think, Tosic is there, and I didn't know Tosic, but Nemanja did know him, and he might text Tosic on your behalf. And if it's coming from him, it's far more likely to get a, yeah, I'm happy to do this, because he's almost vouching for you. He's saying you can trust this guy, you can speak to him. So then when you speak to Tosic, you're coming at it from a position where he's been told to trust you, and he gives you a really good interview. And when you get a really good interview, that's you doing your job well. That's just building up contacts over the years.
100%. You're a braver man than I am calling Nemanja Vidic a knob, by the way. Just on that, something you touched upon there, I don't want to dwell on it, but I just want to ask you a little bit about it, because you've done loads of interviews and you still do a lot of interviews. And then, you mentioned people will just misquote you, take your interview, sometimes not even credit you. I've seen an interview and thought, didn't even know you'd done it. Later on, I've read it in the mag or I've read it wherever. What's that like, and how have you dealt with that? Because that's a sort of new thing that we're seeing more and more of, and it's not just you. I know it happens to other people as well, but especially with you, with some of the interviews you get, when you've put in that graft, you've travelled across the world, you've spent money, you've spent hours on this interview, and you see someone's just basically nicked it.
Yeah, it's really frustrating when one of your best mates sends you a WhatsApp and says, have you seen this about Maradona managing Man United in and he's taking it from a paper? And I think, have I seen it? That's my interview. I'm currently jet lagged because I've got back from doing that interview, and you're reading it out of someone who's just skimmed the quotes. And does it piss you off? Yeah, it does piss you off, because it's cost you a lot of money to go and do the interview or the magazine. But I think that proper journalism, people should support it and they should buy it. It's a difficult time for print publications. And I don't just write for print publications, but I know the time that I put into the work that I do. And with others, I'll just pull them up on it. I remember going to interview Berbatov 2018, and that interview took eight months to set up. And that was a player basically saying to him, you can trust Andy. And I got there and I flew down to see him. And his first words to me were, I've got about 15 minutes. And I thought, that's not going to be good enough. And 90 minutes later, with Berbatov having told me about being the main man on his estate, like a drug lord, and going to the next block of council flats, and everyone going, Berber's coming with his team, and you're thinking this is a great interview, and then people just robbing it. And I pulled some of them up on it, and I said, what are you doing? I can remember a company called Squawker ripping off my quotes, saying, what are you doing? You're magpies. This is my work. And I do have enough followers to humiliate them. And oh yeah, sorry. It's the work experience, kid. I'm sorry, it's not good enough. You're going to pay me. You're going to pay me for my flight to go and do him. So the upshot of that is, if everyone did that, there would be no journalism. So people can plunder all they like, but there will be no original stories. It's got to be paid for one way or another. But I don't mind people saying, this interview's come out and he says this. It's when they take the piss by taking too much. And that's why copyright laws exist. And people just don't understand copyright. It is funny, though, in other countries. I went to Iran to interview Carlos Queiroz in 2014. And I said I was going on Twitter, and about 6 different people got in touch with me, Iranian Reds, saying, if you've got time here, come and meet us. And I did. I met them, and they were great. And they were students. They were really intelligent, and they had they had a copy of, look, this is Fergie's new book. We got it. And because copyright doesn't exist here, we put it into Farsi after only 3 days, and we're now selling it around Iran. And I'm just like, the publishers will be having an absolute nightmare with this. And I put that in United We Stand, and then 3 days later, you know, it was a massive story in a tabloid paper. And I got in touch with the tabloid paper. So that's my story, that. Well, how do we know it's yours? Because I'm the only British journalist who's been to Iran this year. And I tell you how hard it was to get to Iran, and how expensive it was, and how difficult it was for me to get my visa to go there. And I got in because Carlos Queiroz was so helpful. And I met great Iranian people. It was a brilliant trip. So you've got to be in it to win it. You know, I didn't go to interview those student United fans. I went to see Carlos Queiroz, but because you're there, you often get another story. People like to talk, like to give you information. And that trip to Iran was, I was very, very, very nervous going there. But it was one of the best trips that I've done.
What has been, Andy, you've been to so many games over the years. What has been like a memory, not just as a journalist, or maybe both, as a fan, as a journalist, of a sort of a trip or a game that was just sort of one that sticks in your mind?
Well, officially the best game ever is Juventus 2, Manchester United 3. And I got whacked there by a Juventus fan, but that's probably the best. You can't help how you feel, Justin. And at half time in that game, I was so buzzing because Manchester United, who played 2 miles from where I grew up, will go into a European Cup final. And that feeling was even better than the final and the goal. It just was. And I know I'm not supposed to say that, but that's the truth of it. I love fan culture in terms of atmosphere. The trips to Turkey, wow. The noise there. You know, people moan about the acoustics or the roof being at the wrong angle at Old Trafford because it's not noisy enough. Go to Bursaspor or go to Besiktas, and the noise, I can't say it's so loud that it lifts the roof off, because there's not even a roof at Besiktas. But I love going to Turkey, to Greece for the football culture. I find that, you know, I watch a lot of Barcelona, and I know they're brilliant, but I just don't. It's not there. So I've watched. I interviewed Messi when he was 16, 17. I've interviewed him right through, and I know they're brilliant. But I was devastated when they beat United in Rome. I was devastated in Wembley, because I made a knob out myself, because I went on Catalan radio because I could speak the language, and I'd say there'll be no repeat of Rome. We're wiser now. Sorry, not we. Manchester United are wiser now, being professional. And then they were even better at Wembley. So it's brilliant, and to go to these places, and, you know, there are sacrifices. Your mates are going on the beer for a few days. You can't do that. I'll often I won't even drink. I'll go and do my job. I'll do my work. You'll be getting back at, and, you know, you get into this rhythm of like bus, hotel, airport, security, flight, game. And you've got to look after yourself, because if not, it can be pretty draining. But it's a bus, you know, you're getting paid to go to these trips. It's absolutely brilliant. But and my mates don't think it's a job. They just think, you know, come on the beer with us, come and have 5 or 6 pints before the match. So, right, you want me to have 6 pints and then go in a press box and write 800 words about the game? What you do is not work. Well, it's all fun.
Yeah, I know some of your mates as well. I don't know how you manage that. I just wanted to ask you as well, because I've seen this happen a few times with you, Andy. People tweeting you and saying, you know, oh, you gave me a chance at United We Stand. I was writing for you when I was a kid, and now I've got a job, you know, at a paper or whatever. That must be a good feeling as well, because I've seen that happen quite a few times on Twitter. People tweeting you and saying, you know, just wanted to say thanks, sort of thing. That, you know, you mentioned that you've had a lot of good writers over the years, and some of those writers, you know, might have started off in United Stand and have gone on to things, and you've been a part of that.
No, it's better than them slaughtering you on Twitter, isn't it?
Yeah, it makes a change. I mean, yeah.
Look, you know me. I try and help people. There's only so many hours in the day. I'm a straight person. I go to the matches. I'm not hard to find. People don't have to like you, or they can like you, or whatever. But if someone comes to me and they want help, I'll try and help them. But they've got to listen as well. You know, if someone's bright at the writing, I'll give them encouragement. And I love it when I see people thrive and prosper and go on to make a living out of writing. And I find the journalism industry quite frustrating. It seems very middle class. It seems very nepotistic. I don't think that a lot of working class people get the breaks that they should get. Breaks. I don't think a lot of black people get the breaks that they should get. And maybe you could you'd agree or disagree with that. So I've always tried to find some of our best writers are from some of the poorest areas of Manchester, and they might have not got the breaks because they didn't go to the right school, because the parents couldn't afford to send them on an unpaid internship in London. So I'll try, and they might not have the confidence with the writing. And we can go for the sort of esoteric, we can go for the unconventional. We can go for a guy just writing about his local pub in wherever. We've got space for that. And if it pisses off 50% of the readers, I'm all right with that, as long as the other 50% love it. We had a gardening column for years in United We Stand, and people say, "Why have you got a gardening column?" why not? And you know, we've had poets in there. I look for something a bit different, a bit of talent, and I try and help people. And even people selling the mag, you can see like shy kids come along and become more confident and get to know people at the game and become part of that big sort of match going culture, which is really good to see as well. You can just seeing them grow as people and become part of a culture which I've been part of for years, and it is my job now. I can't be doing what I'd be doing and going drinking. And there were times when I was younger where a lot of my friends would be going fighting, and I'd be the only one going away game. They'd all turn left and I'd turn right, and they'd say that I was the odd one. You know, I lived in London for a year when I was 25, and found out that my flat was being used as a base for Manchester United hooligans to meet up so that they could do a pincer attack on Arsenal. And I had like the main lads say, "Yeah, sorry mate, hope you didn't mind. It's just, you know," he said, "it'd be fine if we met in this pub." I'm just like shaking my head, laughing at it. But you've got to be pretty clean when you do what I do, because people will always try and hook you. And you know, you hear stuff about yourself, good and bad, which is totally untrue. Where on earth's that come from? So it makes you wary as a person.
I've heard something. I've heard like, oh yeah, my favourite one was I can't remember, it was a tweet or someone said he's posh Andy Mitten, and I was like, he's not posh. Andy Mitten grew up down the road from me. He's not posh. But no,
we went in the same school. I think I was the only one in my class whose parents could not afford the official school uniform. You know what I mean? So when my parents split when I was 13, there was not a pot to piss in our family. And, you know, I'm not going to say what my mum's salary was, but she was a receptionist in a sports centre. I've worked my arse off, and I was from, mum was from Old Trafford. I spent my first years in Stretford. And if you're in Trafford, the one thing you do have access to is very good state schools. And I got into one of them. However, doing the fanzine took too much of my attention. I remember messing up my French exam, and my teacher just looking at me saying, "Your mind was clearly elsewhere." And I'm like, "Of course it is. It's Charlton Athletic at home tomorrow. And I've got 15 boxes of fanzines that need to be picked up, and I don't drive, and they need picking up." So it's my life now is very different. You know, I'm going between Barcelona, where my wife and children are, and I'm very, very lucky, and I appreciate that. But my background is definitely not posh, put it that way.
That's why I made me laugh.
Proud of it. You know, my parents worked the backside off to, and I don't want to do them down either. But my dad came to me when he wanted a deposit for his house, put it that way, at the same time that most of my mates were going to their parents. Got some great news, son. I've seen an offer for an house. Just need some help with the deposit. Have you got any money for me? Cheers, Dad.
That's such a character, honestly. You always make me laugh when you tell me these stories. And no, I get where you're coming from. Yeah, my mum was the same. Once I passed that 11 plus, I had no choice in what school I was going at to get the bus from Partington to get there. Listen, Andy, it'd be remiss of me not to ask you a transfer story, because everyone will be like, you know what it's like. Oh, ask him about the obvious one, Sancho. What's your take on it? Do you think he will end up coming to Manchester United?
I think he wants to, and I think Dortmund want to sell him, and Manchester United want to buy him. I got information yesterday that there hasn't been a deal yet. There's been no personal terms agreed. And this just seems to me a negotiating process. I don't know what the outcome's going to be. I've been to watch him I was in Dortmund in February. He's been pretty average every time I've watched him, but he's brilliant. And I spoke to people who know far, far more than I do about Dortmund at a professional level, and they're like, he's the real deal. He's brilliant. And I'd love to see him come to United. The situation is that I think United are the only club in for him. So Dortmund don't have the ideal position where Madrid and Barcelona or City and Chelsea or Liverpool are in for him. So that should strengthen United's hands. And I think that the economy around football has changed like it has in the world for every other industry. So Dortmund are just saying 120 million. I think United should negotiate that. I know the club get very frustrated that the transfer stories come out because a lot of it was coming from Germany and they're using the media, and United will start to use the media as well. What's Dortmund's other option? They could have the balls to hold out for a year until next summer, when we don't know where the market will be, in the hope of getting more than they think they'll get this summer. By that time, he's got a year running down on his contract. United do have plan B, plan C, plan D. I wrote a story a couple of weeks ago about Kingsley Coman. I stand by that 100%. But here's an example of how it gets twisted, right? And my story on that was an absolute A. And then I stood the story up and I wrote the story. And that was it. United were interested in him. The player was absolutely interested, maybe as a loan, maybe as a permanent signing. And within 10 minutes of me writing that had become United and Bayern have held talks. And I'd never said that. I'd never said that. My free facts were exactly as I've just said to you. And then that gets debunked from the German side. And then you get 6 hours of abuse. And I'm like, I've done my job properly. And then the next day, the other news outlets, like Sky, I think London Evening Standard, they followed up my story and stood it up as well and said he's one of the options. At no point have I said he's coming. At no point have I said Bayern Munich are willing to sell him. So that's what it shows, what it's like in transfers. And it's a bit mental at times. It really is, the whole noise around it, to the point that you just back off. I knew about that Coman stuff for 3 weeks. And then I put it out there. I chose to put it out there at the time I chose. And people are like, you've just been told to write that. No, I've not. But how do I even get involved in that debate? You're only going to come out of it. You'd end up arguing with someone anonymous on Twitter, and at the very best, you're going to get, well, I'll hold my hands up.
Yeah. That's highly unlikely as well that you're going to get that.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
So that's I know with other players who've been offered to United, I'm not even going to write it, because what good can come from it? I don't need to write it. I've got no editors on my case to write it. And being offered to United is very different from signing for Manchester United. So with Sancho, he is the number one target. I think he's a great player. I just think there's absolutely negotiations going on. But to my knowledge, there's been no agreement on the fee, nor on personal terms, which is quite a normal part of negotiations. The problem is when fans see that City have signed a couple of players early on, and they see United's recent record in the transfer market, and that doesn't fill them with confidence either. So that all goes into the pot as well. But I think this United team are improving. Spoke to Ole Gunnar a few times, and he said, we're 2 or 3 players short of being a team that wins the Premier League, properly challenges for it. And I think that players have got to come in this summer. And I think United are trying to do that. They don't think it's going to be an easy transfer window, but if we get to the start of next season and no new signings have come in, no one's going to buy that either. And people will look back at how much United ended up paying for Harry Maguire or Fellaini, and it just doesn't instill confidence. But it's difficult from United's perspective as well. So anyway, I hope he comes.
Just one final one before you go, Andy. Obviously, you've seen a lot of United teams over the years, and you sort of touched on it then. What do you make of this team and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer? Do you feel that this team could sort of get challenging for the title under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer?
Yeah, with a few more players, I do, yeah. I don't think the squad's strong enough at the moment. I think when you saw the team that played against Norwich and Chelsea, it was a slightly weaker team, and they really struggled. I think Bruno's been a good signing. He's helped the players around him. De Gea needs to stop making the mistakes. The defence is pretty solid. Mason Greenwood's been really encouraging how he's come through. Brandon Williams, I think, will get much better, and I know the coaches think he can be much better. I really like Rashford. I think his stats this season are brilliant. Martial, I think, has had his best season. I'm glad Paul Pogba's back and staying. I think he potentially is a world-class player. Matic has been fantastic this year. Fred's improved. So there's so many positives. And the form after that Burnley game to the end of the season, it wasn't quite title-winning form, but it was getting close to that. So you can see that with a couple of players, and if they can get rid of Sanchez, not Sancho, and a couple of the other players who are earning a lot of money but aren't adding that much to the wage bill, to the team, sorry, they're certainly adding to the wage bill, then it looks in a brighter shape. Ollie's, he does his research. I've spoke to people. I knew what he was doing with Wan-Bissaka last year. He's like really diligently finding out what type of person he was. I wrote a story maybe a month ago about an 18-year-old player at Peñarol, a winger, Pelastre, and the manager of Peñarol is Diego Forlan, and I wrote Diego's columns for 6 years, join the dots about how this story might be coming about. It's a trusted source, it's a trusted contact, and United were interested. United have really followed this lad. That's not to say he's signing him. And Diego said to me, he's not the finished product at all in front of goal. And I said, well, can you think of anyone who could perhaps teach him to score? And Forlan, yeah, I might be able to teach him a thing or two myself. And this may come off, it may not come off. There's so many things that can go wrong. Real Madrid might come in and offer double the money, whatever. There's not even been an offer from United, to my knowledge, but it shows increased detail in the scouting network. United are looking globally for players, and they're doing background. They're finding out, is this a good person? Can he speak English? Is he from a good family? Can he handle the pressure? What's the group around him like as people? And if you're asking those type of questions, you're probably going to be in a better position than with some of the signings United have made in recent years, because they've failed for very different reasons. So do your own work. It's not always going to come off. Signing footballers is not an exact science at all. But, Di Maria, I was excited when he came. He didn't want to come. His wife didn't want to come. And when he signed, everyone's like, brilliant, brilliant. And I celebrated him coming. I did with Schweinsteiger. I did with Falcao because I'd seen how good he was going to be. I even did with Alexis Sanchez as well, because I'd seen how good he was at Barcelona. I'd interviewed him at Barcelona. And then it just quickly turned to shit with a lot of these players, which is really frustrating, because you wonder how the signs have come about. But I think all his signings have been pretty good. And I think his best one has been Bruno. And even Igalo, I think he's a really good loan signing. Pretty unfortunate that he couldn't play for a bit and then Marcus came back. But I remember putting it out when he'd signed, and like a wall of negativity. And I don't think that was fair on him. I think he's proved people wrong. And you get a lot of, I've got to admit, I'm prepared to hold my hands up. Well, I'm sorry, that's not good enough. You don't just abuse somebody. Give someone a chance, first of all. And if they're terrible, then criticise them. Criticise Alexis Sanchez because he was terrible. Fine. But give someone a chance first off. And there's a lot of knee-jerkism around, and I don't think that's healthy either.
No, you're right, and we try and do that on the channel, give everyone a chance. We've had stick for it, giving players a chance and the manager a chance, and people sort of ram it down your throat and, oh, you're you're in the club's pocket and all this nonsense. But everyone deserves a chance, and a lot of those signings you mentioned, I was over the moon when we got Sanchez. I thought he was going to take us to the next level, but it wasn't to be. But it feels like there's a real bit more positivity around United and the team and the players. I don't know, it just feels like a little bit like the feel-good factor's almost returning. I don't know whether you get that sort of feeling. Just some of the players have gotten the personalities.
Yeah, I enjoyed watching United, and I'm really glad that aged 46, I still look forward to every game. I never want that to go. I love watching United, and I'll be honest, there's times when I go to Barca when I have to go and I say to my wife, I'm going to work, and it seems a bit ridiculous, that probably because it is, because you know it's going to take you 8 hours. And I've never had that with United. I love watching United play, and that can evaporate 10 minutes into the game where you think, oh, why has this team been chosen? Why? But that's what any fan does. And some of the games this season, the game against City away, brilliant. In the league, brilliant. And you're watching it thinking, that's my team. Get into him. Sorry, got to write 800 words of completely objective copy here. And I'm never here to supported, but I'm very fair. You can send me to write about City or Liverpool, and I will be very fair. And I'll say, Liverpool at this moment are the English, European, and world champions, and they've set the benchmark very, very high. And I'll take the piss out of Liverpool whenever I can, but I will be fair as well. I won't be bigoted with it. And with United, I try and be objective with it. And I think it can be, because I'm watching an awful lot of them. I know what's going on in the background. Some great results, some great goals. Rashford's free kick at Chelsea was brilliant. And it was pretty grim in the autumn. And I use this stat all the time. It's starting to do my own head in. 4 wins from the first 14 league games. That's not...
I've got that wrong on your quiz, by the way. I think that was one of your quiz questions, and I got it wrong.
I'm not saying it enough, then, am I?
But, mate, I had a nightmare on the last quiz you did, by the way.
It wasn't good enough. It wasn't close to being good enough. But I never felt the manager should be sacked. I always felt he should be supported. I always felt that the problems were not because of him. And I can remember writing it in October, November. I can remember writing it the day before the City away game in the League Cup, after that Burnley defeat. I saying, you've got to support him. And I got slaughtered for it.
Yeah, dark times after Burnley.
And I stood by it. And it was grim. And there were always minimum levels. And it was quite right for people to question where this was going, because it wasn't good enough. And it's all right saying you're building for the future. United still had the second highest wage bill in world football, and being 8th or 9th or even 7th or 6th, it's not good enough. I'm not going to celebrate finishing 3rd either, but I did like it in the last week of the season. Just went, way.
Yes.
And Champions League definitely helps. It helps in recruitment. It helps with the club's bottom line. I think Bruno would have come a year ago if United would have been in the Champions League. Club will never admit that, but I stand by that. And it's the economics of it. United are so much better off being in the Champions League. So hopefully now the players will be happier. They'll get the bonuses. It'll help other players come in. And I'd like to see United back where they should be, right at the top. I think it'd be actually harder now to be as dominant as the team were, because City weren't around, Chelsea weren't around. It's very hard to compete with their riches. PSG weren't around, but United are one of the 3 biggest teams in the world with Real Madrid and Barcelona. And they've been way, way short of that in the last 6 or 7 years. And I think they are on the way back up. But there's still some way to go.
100% agree with all that. Just as we're talking, actually, I don't know if something just popped up about Sanchez deal being confirmed. Sanchez, that is.
Yeah.
Going to Inter. Just give a bit of context as to what time we're recording this. And it's been great chatting to you. As I said earlier, anyone who wants to check out United We Stand, you can check out the link in the description there. You can subscribe. And Andy mentioned there about the summer issue that's out and all the good stuff that's in there, the interviews and the opinions and all the things you can expect from United We Stand and the fan culture stuff as well. So make sure you check that out. Andy, it's been a pleasure having you on, mate. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate you chatting to us and all the stories you told, especially the one about saying to Fergie, I've got to go meet my mate.
I wasn't even there when I went to meet him.
You do, when you sat down with the most successful manager of all time. That's been Andy Mitten. This has been Fanzine Friday. I've been Jay. Don't forget to hit like, share and subscribe. This has been Stretford Paddock. Thanks for watching.